Kristin, thank you so much for being here today, and look forward to today's discussion with you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So just quickly to introduce myself, I'm going to just share my screen. One second.
Looks good there, Kristin.
Yeah. Okay, great. Awesome. So just to quickly introduce myself. So I'm Kristin Condon. I'm one of the partners at Sales Talent Agency. And I've been in recruitment for over 20 years. I've been both on the agency side and in-house on the corporate side. So have built, a career in recruitment strategy and talent acquisition. I've graduated with a postgraduate diploma from Seneca College in Human Resources Management. And I've had the opportunity to influence over 3,000 sales hires over the course of my career. So, through lots of repetition and lots of experience, we have been able to really determine what are some of the key factors that go into really building a world-class elite sales team. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. So I guess just to further Christina's comment, any questions that you have, this is really meant to be a very engaging presentation and conversation. So please, any questions that you have, do not hesitate to ask. You can just put them in the chat as Christina mentioned. I'd be more than happy to address them and answer them throughout the presentation. So the first question I have for the audience, just to really start things off, is, if anyone would like to share what they feel makes a great sales hire. So if you think of that great person that you've hired that's just done so well in their sales role, what really went into making that great sales hire? And so just to start it off, because again, I'm not sure if everyone even knows sometimes what's gone into making a great sales hire, but for example, obviously somebody who hits their numbers, somebody who's done a great job with their clients, who's helped grow business, comes with a certain level of energy and enthusiasm. A lot of times people talk about, not just the team dynamic, but that individual personality in terms of how driven, how motivated they are. So those are typically some of the things that we hear and we see that go into making a great sales hire, which is obviously easy to say, but hard to find. And then the next question is, why do we make bad sales hires, or why do we make bad hires in general? So I'm not sure if anyone even recognizes sometimes, why these bad hires happen, right? And so a lot of times it comes down to you're really making the best hire out of the group that is in front of you. And depending on where your candidate pool comes from, you're typically going to have to make the best hire within that candidate pool. And so sometimes you're making the best hire out of, maybe not the best group of people for you or for that particular role. And so, the key things that we've found that go into making a really great sales hire and how you do that, first is you need to find and attract top talent. You need to be strategic about who you choose, and you need to equip them for long-term success. And so we refer to this as FACE, so find, attract, choose, and equip, and that's what I'm going to go through with you today. Sorry, there we go. So as I mentioned, the find, the attract, the choose, and equip. So if you think about, as I mentioned, your candidate pool, and so here we have a design in terms of you've got your rock stars, you've got your high risk candidates, and you've got your poor candidates that are just simply not a fit. And so a typical candidate pool, especially if that candidate pool is you're relying on those candidates to come to you, you might luck out and have a rock star. And even if you do have a rock star within that candidate pool, there's no guarantee that they want you. They may have applied for that job, or they may have been referred, whatever it could be, but you still have to go through the due diligence of assessing if they're a good fit for you, and they have to do their due diligence in assessing if you're the right fit for them. And so if you have a typical kind of candidate pool where you're relying on one rock star to be that perfect candidate and to accept your job, then you're really putting all your eggs literally into one basket. And so again, as I mentioned earlier, it can really limit your options in terms of making that great sales hire. So what you really want to do is be able to find as many great candidates as possible and have them be infiltrated into your candidate pool so that it gives you more options to choose from. You want to be able to attract people to that candidate pool, and we'll chat a little bit about how you can best attract candidates. And then obviously within that candidate pool, you want to ensure that you're choosing the right candidate for you, that they've also had the chance to ensure that you're the right fit for them. And then finally, once you've made that great decision, you want to ensure that you're equipping them for success. You don't want to have found this perfect person and then find out 2 months later that they're unhappy, they're not connected, and then they leave your organization. That's very expensive for you. It's very time consuming. It's obviously an unfortunate situation for that candidate as well. And so you want to mitigate that as much as possible. So when we talk about finding a candidate, so one thing we've chatted to many clients about and how we obviously approach recruitment is you want recruitment to really be set up as a sales function. So when you think of sales, you have, quotas, you have an ability to forecast, you want to be able to be proactive with sales, right? If you're just relying on clients coming to you, you're not going to do as well as if you have a sales team that's proactively reaching out to clients and finding net new business. And really, recruitment should be treated the same way. And so if you think of, and I'll go into it a little bit more in a bit, but if you think about how you're looking for that great sales candidate or sales candidates to join your team, you need to really approach recruitment in a very proactive way. And you also need to understand all of the steps that go into that final hire. It's not going to be find one candidate and make one hire, or find two candidates and make one hire. In fact, and you can see from the funnel that we've created here, you have to reach out to on average about 200 people to get down to that one perfect hire, because ultimately you're reaching out to people and then start shortlisting within that group. You're going to be having conversations. You have to ensure that they're the right fit. They are ensuring if you're the right fit for them, and then you're qualifying them even further. There's other opportunities. We'll talk a little bit about what your competition is. And, even if you find great people, guess what? Other people are also interested in those candidates. And so you really do need to ensure that you have enough candidates in your pipeline to be able to get down to that final hire.
Kristin, is this a typical funnel for most companies that you work with and see?
It's on average, it is. Depending on the complexity, there's a lot of things. So depending on the complexity of your search, so if it's very niche, if it's very specific, if it's very senior, your funnel could be even higher. It could be 5 candidates that you have to reach out to in order to have one conversation. If you're very limited in terms of, like, as an example, if you're a company in, I'm just making this up, but like Thunder Bay, well, your candidate pool is, and you need somebody to be physically located, near your office. Well, your candidate pool is going to be much smaller. So again, depending on some of the nuances of your organization or the search, that funnel could look a little different. But yes, this is an average kind of funnel of what an organization would need to look at in order to ensure that they had enough people to make that hire. So there are 3 candidate pools that an organization will be able to hire from. So the first candidate pool is the candidates who know your organization and they want to work for you. Not many companies have a lot of hiring from this candidate pool. Companies that benefit from this would be a Google or a Facebook, where everyone's applying to them and they basically don't have to go beyond a certain network because so many people want to come to them. Most organizations, even billion-dollar organizations, are ones that candidates have not heard of. And so again, if you're just relying on hoping someone's going to come to you because they really want to work for you, it's going to be a very limited pool for most companies. The next candidate pool is the people who are looking for the exact job that you've posted. Basically, we call that a luck-based strategy. And so basically, just sort of luck of the world, you posted this job and the perfect person for this job happens to see it and happens to apply and happens to get the job. So again, it can happen, but if you're relying on that as your main strategy, then again, it's going to either take you a very long time to find that person, if at all. The third pool of candidates is basically the people who have that perfect skill set of what you're looking for, and they do not know about your organization, or they don't realize that you have that perfect opportunity for them. And so ultimately, that's where you have to be very proactive. You have to make sure that you're relying on more than one strategy to get to these people. And that can be through networking events. It can be through your own branding. Chris Mulhall chatted last week in terms of just ensuring that you're doing the right things from an employment branding perspective. And then also working obviously with some agencies, an employee referral program. There's lots of things that you can do to attract that candidate pool, but that is going to be where you find the significant amount of people that you need for your candidate pipeline in order to make sure you're making the right hire.
Kristin, is it possible for startups and scale-ups who don't yet have that broad-reaching brand to attract candidates from pools 1 and 2?
It's possible, but again, it's not going to be easy. And again, even if you're a startup or a very, very large organization, like most companies have to still do the same thing. So they have to ensure that they're, building out their employment brand. They have to make sure that they're, this isn't about, make sure you're paying LinkedIn for your job posting, and that it's branded on LinkedIn. You have to do a lot of different tactics. And really, a lot of it's going to come down to having conversations with candidates. It's a very, very time consuming part of the process. Ultimately, that's why there are agencies, because that's where they're going to spend a significant amount of their time. But yes, it is possible, but it's just going to take time. And even if you are a well-known brand, you still need to be ensuring that you're looking at all 3 candidate pools, because you're not going to, if you're just relying on one candidate pool, especially number 1 or number 2, it's just going to take a long time. So as an organization grows, as their brand grows, they'll get more candidates out of candidate pool number 1 or 2, but they're always going to need the strategy to find candidates in candidate pool number 3. Next, so you want to talk about being proactive and not reactive. So if you think of most companies and how they traditionally approach recruitment, they'll realize, okay, April, we need to make a hire. And so in April, they start their recruitment process. And so that means that even though they needed that hire for April, they're probably not going to have that hire until June, if they're lucky. An average recruitment process can take about 4 weeks from start to finish. And then you still need 2 weeks for someone to be able to resign and give notice. So you're looking at 6 weeks when, it's typically 6 weeks. However, again, depending on the nuances of the search or the complexities of the search, it can be much longer than that. So if you're only starting your recruitment process when you've realized, okay, we need to make a hire for April 1st, and you're starting in April or just a week before, it's going to take you at least 6 weeks before you can make that hire. And so that means you're going 2.5+ months without that person in that role, which obviously impacts your revenue. It impacts your entire funnel, right? So you want to be proactive. And so in the next slide, we talk about how you really need to be starting your recruitment process and building your candidate pipeline months before you need to make that hire. That gives you the opportunity to be reaching all candidate pools, but specifically candidate pool number 3, where you can build your brand, you can have networking events, you can work with agencies, your recruiters can be proactively reaching out to candidates. And so that will help build that funnel so that at the time you do need to make the hire, you have a much stronger candidate pool to choose from, or candidate pipeline to choose from. And it shouldn't just stop once you've made the hire. If you know that you're a growing organization, and you also have to anticipate that there will be some turnover. I mean, the best companies still have turnover. And so if you're having a proactive approach to recruitment all the time, and always trying to ensure that you're meeting with some people and having introductions to some great candidates, then those candidates will be in your pipeline at a time that you do need to make a hire. So how do you attract candidates? So it's really important for companies to understand who their competition is. Many, many times when we're working with companies, they think that their main competitor is within their industry. So as an example, you're a logistics company and you think, okay, I want to hire a salesperson. So, where do I get the salesperson from, my competitor being another company within logistics. The truth is that, a lot of times your competitors don't come from your industry. If someone's looking to hire a rock star salesperson, that's a hunter with 1 year of B2B sales experience, I can tell you right now that Xerox is hiring that person. Grandin Toy is hiring that person. Cintas is hiring that person. Every single industry is, Yellow Pages, every single industry is looking for that person. And so your competition is much wider and bigger than you anticipate. And so it's very, very important that when you're approaching recruitment, you understand how to be competitive, and what your competition looks like, and how important it is that you really need to address what a candidate is looking for, what's appealing to them, so that you can attract them to your organization and you can attract them to your role. That doesn't mean overselling them or overpromising them, but it's really, like same thing as we chatted about in terms of approaching recruitment as a sales function, is when you're chatting with prospective clients, you want to do your due diligence and understanding what a client's looking for, what their pain points are, what's appealing to them before you start selling your product or service. It's the exact same thing with recruitment. You really need to understand what a candidate is looking for. What are their pain points in their current job? What are they looking to do, 2, 5, 6 years from now? And then you can see if it's aligned to your organization and aligned to your opportunity, and then you can attract them to that role. And they'll be much more connected because it'll be very specific to their needs. We look at all the, we've kind of created some groupings of organizations. So we have the media darlings, which are very, the most sought after employer. I mentioned, the Googles and the Facebook. So that's going to be a very big competitor. You could be a great organization, but if a candidate has a choice within your company and to go work for Google, well, you have to make sure that your competitive offering is really great, because you're going to have that working against you a little bit. There's blue chippers. And so those companies are, again, ones that have very strong brands. If you think of an IBM, they have, very strong brands, a very strong legacy. And so again, that's something that you have to be mindful of if you are a startup. How do you compete against a company like that? Well, certainly you're a more entrepreneurial organization. You're going to be more fast paced. So there's things that you can leverage that you have, but you just need to know, you have to identify them and then make sure that you're mentioning them in the recruitment process. There's the sexy up and comers, which a lot of startups fall within, especially in the tech space. And so, you want to think about how are you competing against the other sexy up and comers? And we'll chat a little bit about how these different kind of groupings leverage them and brand themselves, and then what you need to do to kind of counter that. The workhorses, they are often not the most sought after companies, but they do significant amount of hiring and they have quite a lot of turnover. So I mentioned Xerox as an example. They're one of the best companies to learn sales and learn the foundation of sales, and they're always aggressively hiring. And so you also want to understand what you can offer a candidate in comparison to what they would offer. So a sexy up and comer, you guys have probably seen this, but a lot of sexy up and comers, they've branded themselves as an organization to work for because they have, free lunches and they have foosball tables and they have, all these kind of fun things that are above and beyond the typical work day. And that was a very attractive part of joining an organization, but it's not the thing that necessarily seals the deal. And especially if that's something you can't offer, you need to figure out, okay, how do I compete against that organization? Well, you maybe can offer somebody equity. You can offer them an opportunity to grow within your organization a lot quicker. Maybe you're not going to be as siloed. So there's things that you can think about, but you need to understand, again, what you're working against when you're competing against, as an example, a sexy up-and-comer. Blue chippers and workhorses, they market themselves with, these awards and accolades as, best workplace, 100 best company to work for in Canada, Canada's top employer. And again, that can seem very attractive and can offer a lot of stability to somebody. So again, how do you compete against that? You need to have an understanding of your value proposition and your offering so that when you're chatting with candidates, you can be proactive in addressing that. If you leave it for the candidate to figure out, you're leaving a lot to chance, just as a candidate would be leaving a lot to chance if they left it for you to figure out how great they were for your organization. A candidate should be selling themselves to you, just as you should be selling yourself to that candidate. So when you talk about employment value proposition, there's 5 key things that are very, very important to go into that. So one, you want to let candidates know that you're solving an important problem. So just like you want your clients to know you're solving an important problem. And then how are you uniquely positioned to do it? The progress that you've made in doing that. And then the growth that it's creating from a career opportunity perspective. And then finally that how you've made your employees feel valued and important. These are 5 key things that should be very clearly outlined and conveyed to candidates that you're considering for employment. Ultimately, again, going back to the analogy of treating recruitment as a sales process, you would be doing all of this with prospective clients. And so you want to ensure that you're doing that with candidates as well. You want to have proof behind what you're saying, just as candidates should have proof behind what they're telling you they can do. The choosing is a really interesting part. A lot of people find, analyzing sales candidates to be very hard, because if someone's really good at selling themselves, sometimes you can be oversold. And so sometimes employers find that they interviewed this person, they were fantastic in the interview process, and then they get them on board and they're actually not that great. And so this is a question that comes up a lot. The other thing too is if you're looking at hiring junior talent, well, junior candidates don't have a lot of proof behind them. You're actually hiring them based on potential. And so again, a lot of clients ask, like, how do we assess potential? It's very hard to see that on LinkedIn, like to really be able to determine that, or on a resume that doesn't have a ton of experience behind it. And so some of the key things that we look for, we call it DNA Pro. It's our methodology in assessing sales candidates. And it allows us to assess a junior candidate to a very, very senior seasoned candidate. So the first 3 components to DNA Pro are drive, nature, and acumen. Drive stands for someone's drive, obviously, their work ethic, their resilience, their ability to hit a goal despite obstacles that come up. There's a saying that winners and losers have the same goal, right? And the difference is who pushed through the obstacles that came up. So if you decided you wanted to run a marathon, did you still train when it was a snowstorm? Did you still train despite spraining your ankle? Those are the people that you really want to find out about. And so when you're interviewing candidates, especially ones that don't have a ton of experience, you really want to delve into their drive, their work ethic, and their resilience. When you look at nature, so nature really refers to emotional intelligence and empathy, which is so key, especially when you have people who are going to be dealing with your clients. You want somebody who can really relate to the client, who can be empathetic to that client situation, and that doesn't just put their own needs. Oh, I've got to hit my quota, or I've got to close this deal at all costs. You want somebody to have an understanding of what that client needs and what their challenges are, and that they will put that first and foremost before anything else. And finally, that they, have the ability to read the room, right? That's so important. And so you really want to delve into the emotional intelligence and empathy of a candidate, which is going to be there whether they're 17 years old or they're 70. This isn't something you can create in somebody. You can't create drive in somebody. You really want to be able to see if it exists, and certainly you can build upon it, but it needs to be there. And the last piece is acumen. And it doesn't just mean, is this a smart person, or do they have common sense? It really comes down to curiosity. And is somebody have focused curiosity? Do they ask focused questions to better understand a situation, and then take that information and apply it as they are sharing your product or your service with that client? It's very important. People who have curiosity are going to be much more connected to a client, and that pitch in terms of what they're selling will be much more connected and tailored to that specific client's needs.
Kristin, can you give some examples of some questions in the interview process that companies could ask in order to kind of dive into some of these areas?
Absolutely. So when you think of drive, so one question we like to ask is, tell us about a time you set a goal for yourself. What were some of the obstacles that came up and, that could have prevented you from hitting that goal? And what did you do to overcome them that ensured that you were still able to meet that goal? So that's going to be that's a great question. It's one that often most people aren't going to be prepared for. So you don't have to worry so much about it being rehearsed. And certainly, it'll give you an opportunity as they're answering to kind of probe in further. And you'll see, some of the answers are going to be, lacking some substance, but some of them are just phenomenal. And you learn so much about somebody, again, that's not going to be on their resume. When it comes to empathy, a great question to ask is, tell me about a time where you put someone else's needs in front of yours. Or there was you were in a competitive situation with somebody, but you you put their you put their situation in front of yours, and you can learn about when somebody thought about another person and put that person's needs obviously in front of their own. And then from an acumen perspective, a great question is tell me about a time that you had to learn something new. How did you go about learning it, and how did you apply that information to a certain situation that put you in a better spot, and how you approached it? And again, that could be from school, it could be from a personal situation. The great thing about drive, nature, and acumen is it doesn't have to come from a professional situation, because as I mentioned, it exists in that person's life personally and professionally. Driven people, they're driven in every situation in life. And so it really allows the candidate to pull from any kind of aspect or any example, and it doesn't have to just be work related.
That's great for especially more junior clients who, as you said, haven't had the opportunity to build up the resume or a lot of work examples. But if they can draw on, examples from school or other areas, that helps to show, again, their potential of who they could be.
Absolutely. We hire a lot of junior talent for our own organization. And when we ask that question, like some of the things that the candidates or like our now employees have shared with us, it's so impressive. And everyone knows when I say this, they're going to know what I'm talking about, but it's like, when you meet somebody and there's something that they say to you or something that they share to you, and you just know on another level what that actually means. Like you just know, wow, like that's not most people would have given up in that scenario, or that's some real grit, or that's real toughness. And there's something that comes out of it that's not rehearsed. It's so real and raw. And that's what you're really trying to tap into when you dive into the DNA specifically. The next part is the PRO. So PRO comes with experience. So the more experience somebody has, the more they're going to have with relation to these three kind of areas. So performance is obviously the performance history of sales. It's great when someone has some experience because they can show you, okay, great, I had a target and I met this target, or I overachieved on this target, or I was on a team of 10 salespeople and I was number one on that team. I was recognized and I made President's Club or the Elite Circle, whatever it may be. These types of metrics and achievements and recognitions show consistently someone's ability to perform. And obviously, as we all know, past performance is a strong predictor of future performance. So the more intel you get from here, the less risky it is for you to hire that person and think and be concerned about their ability to hit targets. When you look at relevancy is one of my favorite things to look at, because it really helps open up candidate pools. So when we chatted earlier about what your competitive landscape looks like in terms of your candidate pipeline, so many clients initially that we work with or organizations that I've worked for think, okay, we're in finance, we're in banking, so we only can look at candidates that are in banking, or we could only look at candidates that have sold to this exact client, this exact type of profile. And what happens is that really limits you. Now, there are some situations that you may have to have some very specific key things in that candidate profile that you're looking for. However, if there's an opportunity to open it up, you want to be able to do that, because the more niche and small your candidate pool is, the harder it is to find those candidates. And just again, the more you're going to be relying on a lot of your eggs in one basket per se. If you look at things like deal size, if you look at things like sales cycle, consultative sales versus transactional sales, selling into SMB versus selling into enterprise, if you start looking at those things when you think of relevancy, if you are a consultative company, you have a consultative sales process that's 6 to 12 months, selling into CMOs with a deal size of $100,000. Well, then you can look at candidates that come with that type of experience from other industries or from other sectors. And so again, it really opens up your candidate pool, and it allows you to choose the best person for your organization. So relevancy is a really great thing to look at in terms of being able to open up what types of candidates you're attracted to and that you're attracting. And then opportunity management refers to progression and stability. You really want to ensure that your opportunity is a great next step for this person in their career. If somebody's taking 5 steps back for your opportunity, or, you know, a significant cut in compensation, again, maybe that will work, but the risk is much higher. The risk is much, much higher. So you really want to ensure, or, you know, if you've seen that somebody's jumped every year to a new job, again, there might be some good reasons for it, but it can be more risky that this person is probably going to leave your organization in a year or not work out in a year. So you want to look at some key factors that show you stability, and that from a progression perspective, your opportunity is a good next step for them. So performance is measured proof. The relevancy ensures a fast ramp up, and opportunity management means that you've got, you know, ideally a 5+ year potential of this person being within your organization. When we're working with companies, you know, one thing we always want to ensure is that when we're placing a candidate with them, is that that candidate is going to be there ideally 3+ years from now. We're not looking for a quick hire for our, like, for that client. It's not a win for that candidate either, you know. So you really want to see, is there a 5-year potential for this candidate? And at the very least, you want to see they're with your organization for 3 years. Doesn't mean they can't move up or change roles at the time, but ultimately that there's you know, enough stickiness there, and that's where you're going to get real ROI on that candidate as well.
Kristin, what does a typical ramp up time look like?
It depends on a lot, actually. Like, it depends on the training and the onboarding. Some clients have a much longer training process. They may have a more complex sale. If the sales cycle is very long, it will just take longer for someone to ramp up, because they won't be able to build that. It'll take them some time to build that funnel and start seeing, you know, the results of their prospecting activities. When it's junior candidates, so I will say typically you'll know within 3 months. It should, you know, most, like 90% of companies will know within 3 months if that candidate's going to work out or not. Because again, you know, it's an easier, typically a more measured role, and it's just easier to see if the activities are happening. It might take longer to see the results, especially if you're looking for a more junior candidate, but the activities definitely should be there. The energy, the attitude, we refer to it as skill, will, and strategy. And so when, you know, is the skill there? Okay, maybe they don't have the skill coming into the role, but they're able to build that skill. And so they're going to be able to do that through their activities. The will, though, is that desire to win, that energy and that effort, and you'll see that right away. And then strategy is something that takes some time to build, but you want to be able to start seeing some inklings, again, from an acumen perspective, where they're taking information that you're giving them and they're applying it, and you can see that there's progress from that perspective, or progression from that perspective. With a more senior role, it's going to take probably 6 to 12 months. And it's really important that that's articulated in the recruitment process, because you don't want to mislead candidates. If it's going to take 6 to 12 months for them to really ramp up and start seeing results, then that's going to affect compensation. And so you want to have a very transparent conversation with the candidate, so that they know what they're walking into, and that they have that expectation very clearly laid out for them. And then we go into equipping for success. And this also is related to your question, Christina, because depending on how someone's equipped for success, that also can affect the ramp up period. I mean, our world's turned upside down a year ago. Everyone's now gone remote. And I think the biggest challenge for companies this time last year was, how do we onboard? How do we train remotely? And so this is a challenge that many have overcome over the last year, which is fantastic, but it's so important more than ever, because you can't rely on your company culture the same way that you could rely on it before. You can't rely on osmosis of information and sharing of that information the way that we could rely on it before. That's one thing that impacted us significantly, because our new hires would be able to learn and hear about all these different roles and opportunities that we were working on, and learn so much at once, or we would be able to hear them and jump in on a call and give them some feedback. And obviously that's gone. And so it's really important that your business has evolved with that, and that you're still putting a lot of effort and time and consideration in terms of how you're equipping those candidates for success, or your hires for success. You can't, you know, it's more than just, did we give them a computer and we gave them the training material and they've got my number, they can call me any time of day. There's so much more that goes into that, which we'll chat about right now. So we talk about a salesperson's hierarchy of needs. So if you think of a human being, we all have a hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so there's key things that we need as humans. And then when we kind of look at it specifically from a salesperson's perspective, there's key things that a salesperson needs in order to feel important and connected to an organization and to an opportunity. So number one at the very, oh, sorry, actually I'll work kind of bottom to the top. So first is that they need a clear value proposition. And I chatted about that a little earlier, but the value proposition of your organization needs to be clearly articulated to them. If this is a person that's your frontline salesperson and they're going to sell your product or service and they don't fully understand what the value proposition is, A, it's going to impact that sales funnel, but B, that person is going to struggle. The best salespeople are the most passionate about what they're selling. It doesn't matter what that is. And so you want them to be as passionate and as excited as possible about your organization and what your organization can offer prospective clients. And big part of that is them understanding that and being connected to that. Then you need proof. And what I mean by proof is you need to have case studies, reference letters, clients that are willing to share their experience and the value of what you've offered them. The more proof you have, yes, you're making it easier for that salesperson to sell your product or service to other companies, but it also just lets them have confidence, a lot of confidence behind the proof that they can, what they're selling to that company is legit. And so it's very important that proof is there. Then engaged support is also especially important. So, you can provide somebody with, here, there's some proof that we've done well, and this is our value proposition. But especially in those, that ramp up period, it's very important that someone has that engaged support. And it's not, there's a lot of articles out there around, an effective one-on-one. A one-on-one should not just be about going through someone's pipeline funnel and just, did you call 50 people this week and things like that. Yes, it's important as part of their KPIs that they've done those things. And obviously those KPIs have been set based on the fact that it forecasts the probability of success, but it's really important that you're also checking in, especially now more than ever, where everyone's going through such an ambiguous time. And there's, a lot more hardships that people are going through personally, not just professionally. And so you really want to check in with your employees and make sure that you're really engaged and connected to them and that they really feel like you care. Then the next level is realistic targets. And this is something that we get asked about a lot, because if you don't have realistic targets, it's going to be very hard for someone to be motivated. Salespeople are very driven by targets and by compensation, and that compensation being aligned to those targets. You need to have targets that are realistic. They shouldn't be easy, but they shouldn't be impossible either. It shouldn't be like 1% of your team is able to hit those targets. And, and this is something that a lot of salespeople take pride in their ability to hit those targets or overachieve on those targets. And so you want to ensure that those targets are realistic and that they're directly aligned to that person's compensation. It drives the right behavior, especially if you're looking to hire hunters. And so you want to ensure that the targets and the compensation are aligned to the behavior and activity of a hunter. And the last part is a big picture. And this is no matter what organization you are, and no matter what employee you have, it's beyond just salespeople, but it's very important that employees understand the big picture. And there's a lot, again, of articles and research that have come out about this, but if someone's connected to the big picture of the organization, then they will feel much more like they belong, and they'll feel less ambiguous about their future, their career, or where this company is going. So the more that you can communicate about the big picture, your strategies, your long-term goals, your short-term goals, the higher probability that that salesperson or employee will feel connected to your organization, and higher probability that they'll stay long-term. So the key takeaways is finding great talent. So you want to ensure that you're treating recruitment as a sales function, and that you understand that it's going to be more than just one strategy that's going to give you the best pool of candidates to choose from. Next is attracting candidates. So you want to be more than just, just if you have a foosball table or you have free lunch is great, but you should be more than that. And you also need to understand how do you fare in the competitive landscape against all the other companies that are looking to hire the exact same candidates you are. In terms of choosing, you really want to make sure that you do not compromise on the drive and the nature and the acumen. You want to ensure that you're doing your due diligence to really uncover that about a salesperson. And then again, depending on the level of what you're looking to hire, start looking at the performance history, the relevancy of their experience, and the stickiness of your opportunity for them as a next step. And then finally is the equipping for success. And you want to have a shared plan for each employee, and that will give you a higher probability of long-term success.
Kristin, going back to the attracting talent, now that everybody is remote and things like foosball tables or catered lunches aren't possible, are there things that you recommend or that you're seeing that companies are doing really well in order to attract in this virtual world?
Yeah, absolutely. One client we work with is Form Hero. So they're part of the Communitech family, and they do the best things. They have an organization, actually another company through Communitech that creates events. And so they have a monthly event, and so for all employees. And so there's like a painting day, there's salsa classes, and so that can be fun. It can really connect. And we actually started working with that company as well, and we've implemented that in for our team, and we've received great feedback about it. It just lets everyone come together and be connected. You can do things like a stretching class once a week, and it can, some of those things can be optional, and then some of those things can be more of a mandated company event. But that's always a great thing to do. I think doing anything around mental health right now is especially important. So just, having some flexibility from that perspective. Not obviously, especially small companies, we're one where, you can't have unlimited mental health benefits, but looking at an employee assistance program, which doesn't cost a lot, is usually part of any benefits offering, or having mental health days, or creating a meditation event or something like that can be very helpful, but very appreciated by employees right now. Obviously, from a compensation perspective, if you have a really strong compensation plan in place that's achievable, that's very important. And I would say things like having flexibility in terms of, what flexibility used to mean was, I can work from home once a week, that kind of thing. Well, everyone's obviously at home now. So flexibility in the day, if somebody has children, or they have, or they just need, at 12 o'clock, I need to go for a walk for an hour, like allowing someone to have flexibility in that workday is more appreciated than obviously some of the things that existed in the past. So I think on that note, Kristin, is asking your employees what's important to you. You're not going to be able to do everything, but asking what's important and getting some ideas, and then you can address that directly.
I think that's super helpful. We do have a question come in from the audience. When is the right time for founders to start hiring initial sales reps? So if you're a new company getting off, at what point in your journey do you start hiring sales reps?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that comes down to you. So a lot of founders are their first salespeople, right? They're doing all the sales, and you're doing everything else because you're running an entire business. And so you're going to need help, right? So finding that first salesperson is key. But the truth is, you are very limited in time. So when you think of being able to train somebody, being that engaged support, equipping them for success, I find that for a lot of founders, that's the most challenging part for them, because they just only have, they're literally running every aspect of that business. And so it can be very hard. So I think that, you want to, I think it comes down to when you can afford to pay for somebody, but secondly is, being a little proactive about and open to kind of finding that person, because that first hire for you will be so key in helping build out your sales team, ideally kind of in the future. But you need that person to be very entrepreneurial, very, very entrepreneurial and coachable, and somebody who doesn't need a lot of hand holding, because you just are not going to be able to provide that for that first hire. So I think those are the most important things to think about when a founder is looking to make that first hire.
Thank you. Just to the audience, we have about 10 minutes or so left. So if you do have any questions that Kristin hasn't hit on during her presentation today, please feel free to put them in the chat. She's happy to answer anything related to hiring sales folks. One question I had, Kristin, was we've talked a lot about dues and things that companies should do in the hiring process. Are there things that companies should stay away from, right? Some major don'ts, things that you've seen companies do in the past that just don't work. Anything that people should be aware of?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of these things people probably already kind of know, but sometimes forget about. I think one thing is like anything, and this goes for candidates and for clients, is that you really should you follow through on what you've told somebody you'll do. So if you tell someone you're going to get back to them, because you may not want to hire that person today, but I mean most of the companies today on the call especially are companies that are building their brands and building out their network, and so you do not want to get any negative press or feedback from your candidate process. Candidate experience is very important. They can be future clients and they could be future candidates again, or they may know somebody, so it's really important that you do your best to give a great candidate experience. Secondly is that you want to be respectful of candidates' time. So if if you're dragging out a process, and again, I totally get there's 100 other things that are going on with the business, but if you take too long to make a hire, you're going to lose those candidates. Or if you're interviewing candidates and then you're not sure what you're really looking for, you're burning through a bunch of candidates that you're not going to be able to get back again. And so I think it's really important that you know what you're looking for. You have some flexibility in terms of what that looks like, because a lot of times you can go to market thinking, okay, I'm going to pay this and I'm looking for this, and you're going to uncover, guess what, you're going to have to pay a little more, or maybe you need to go a little more junior, whatever it may be. And so there will be, it's not a perfect science, of course, but having a bit of flexibility, but just being mindful, like if you're too ambiguous or you're not really sure or you're not really to pull the trigger, you can really create a bad candidate experience. So I think it's very important to be mindful of that. And then in terms of standard things, like you don't want to ask inappropriate questions. I would also recommend or refrain from sometimes companies are like, oh, I can get an inside reference on this candidate, and they'll go and ask information. Just make sure that you're not putting that candidate in jeopardy, because obviously their employer doesn't often know that they're looking or open to a new opportunity. And so, you want to just be respectful of that. Of course, if you have a way to get some inside information on a candidate that lets you know if they're going to be a great fit for your organization, totally get asking that, but you just want to make sure that you're not putting them in jeopardy.
Got it. Thank you. Super helpful. We do have another question from the audience. I'm not sure if this is within your realm or not, but what are your thoughts around outsourcing sales through channels and other ways of outsourcing sales versus hiring in-house to do it?
Yeah, it can be a great avenue. Again, just be mindful that that channel or that strategy is representing your business. So you want to just make sure that they know how to position your brand, they understand your value proposition, and that essentially they're a representative of you and your brand. So it's really important that when you're picking that company or that person to do it, that you've done some real due diligence on that person. And the other thing I would say is, if you're a smaller organization and you're looking to go that route, ideally look for somebody who's already selling within the channel of what you're looking to connect with, because then that person or that small business can do a better job, because they're already kind of experts within that space. And so I would recommend diving into that a little bit more as well.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions in the chat, so I'll throw out one last call. If anyone has any final burning questions for Kristin, get them in the chat now. That would be great. We'll just give people a minute there. Any final thoughts from you, Kristin, as we wrap up on I know you went through your key takeaways for each of the face aspects. Is there anything else that you'd want to leave participants with today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be a lot of fun. Like I obviously love recruitment. I've been in it long enough. It can seem overwhelming, but I think that when you approach recruitment with some process to it, and that you understand sort of there are specific stages to it and kind of the amount of work that has to go into it at the beginning to really get you great results at the end, like sales, then it can create a bit of a paradigm shift in terms of the approach to recruitment. I found even when I was on the HR side of things, a lot of people that were more generalists and they'd have recruitment as part of their responsibilities. They hated recruitment. Not everyone loves recruitment. Like anything, like I said about sales, the more passionate you are about something, the better comes through. But it can be a lot of fun, and you can meet some fantastic people. And especially if you're doing recruitment for your own business, you've got to remember you're representing your business. That energy that they get, the level of effort that goes into it will just pay back tenfold if you go in with the right mindset to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. Just a reminder to the audience that Sales Talent Agency is a Communitech Pro Squad member. So if you'd like to connect with Kristin, feel free to do so out on her LinkedIn or on our Communitech page under Pro Squad, or reach out to your Communitech CSM or advisor, and we'd be happy to connect you. Thanks again, Kristin, for your time today, and for the audience for joining and your questions. I think this was really great information.
Thank you. It's
So
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.